And so this is separate than from the autopilot issues we had discussed in previous episodes. This is power steering. So even if no autopilot, it's just someone driving in their car and they lose control of the car essentially because the steering isn't working.
Right. They can't steer the car. So for example, one of the cases that was linked to a crash is a driver who was trying to make a right-hand turn and the power steering's out. And so they're trying, and they couldn't make the turn and ended up striking a vehicle. And then another individual actually talked about what happened to him, and he said that he nearly went into a ditch. He said he felt the steering wheel on his 2023 Model Y jerk to the right, and he said, "quote It tried to kill me." It's taken him off into a ditch.
Yeah, 2023. I mean, that's a new model.
Right. And so yeah, it's Model 3 and Model Y vehicles from 2023.
Prioritizing profits. Prioritizing
dangerous drug and product cases.
Welcome back. Another week, another episode. Prioritizing profits, dangerous drug and product cases. How are you doing? How's your weekend? How's your day?
All good. Actually, lots going on, but all positive things. It was fun seeing you and Christina this weekend. We did a little pre-recording since I will be heading to Tampa tomorrow. And so busy week. And then last night, Peter and I were celebrating. February 6th is the anniversary of the day we met.
Wow.
For the first time. And so it was 11 years last night.
It's impressive you guys remember that. I don't think I could figure out, even if I tried and went back, I don't know if I could figure out the day me and Christina met. I mean, maybe. I guess if we went through years of photos and...
Well, but you guys met in Miami, and so you could probably figure out the dates of that trip. Yeah,
it just seems like so much work there.
So here's the funny thing. Peter is more romantic than I am. I know this is hard to imagine, but so we celebrate a lot. I mean, we celebrate February 6th, the day we met. Our wedding, of course, which is September 19th.
Anniversary, yeah.
9/19 anniversary. But then he celebrates the day we got engaged, which is
Jesus Christ.
August 28th or 29th. I don't know. He would know, obviously.
Yeah.
And then we even celebrate the day we officially turned in our marriage paperwork, which is January 1st, because for tax reasons, we'd already planned the celebration. So we celebrated as planned the big wedding on 9/19, but we didn't actually file the paperwork until 1/1.
Well, that's reasonable. I think celebrating the day that you turn in the paperwork, well, especially because it's right after New Year's, right? So it's oh, Happy New Year, and then boom, oh, happy wedding and official signing anniversary day.
So we kind of have 4 anniversaries we celebrate. Yeah. But then the other thing that I found is that if you go to a restaurant, which we did last night, and I'll tell you about that as well, but if you go to a restaurant and you say it's your anniversary, you almost always get a free dessert.
Yeah, I mean, it's like doing a birthday trick as well. Saying it's
but you could get caught on the birthday trick because they could ask for your ID. But nobody carries around their marriage license. So you could basically, every time you go out to dinner, say it's your anniversary.
Yeah.
And be, racking up some free desserts.
I would be shocked if someone checked the ID. But I guess if it was me and Christina and we get ID'd for ordering a drink, they also say it's our birthday.
And then they're like, wait a minute.
And we tell them it's a fake ID, so it's it's a lose-lose either way. That's impressive. You guys have so many holidays, and the fact that you keep track of it. Is it something where both of you have it on your calendar and you're aware, or is it more kind of like my situation where it's Christina on Monday is hey, are you looking forward to our anniversary this week? Wink, wink.
Well, I would say, as I said, Peter's a little bit more romantic than I am, so it's kind of more his thing that we celebrate all 4 of these. Mm-hmm. But the February 6th one comes up a lot, so...
Yeah.
So that's pretty much drilled into my memory at this point, yeah.
And do you get gifts for each other, or is it just a dinner? Is it one year someone does one thing, or one holiday, anniversary, whatever you want to call it, so one does kind of the planning and stuff, and then you guys switch off, or how's that work?
Well, so there have been times, and again, with that many of them, that's a lot of presents. Yeah, I mean, not that I mind. So this time, over the years, it kind of varies. But at this point, I feel kind of like, if there's some particular gift that I've seen that's great for him, okay, maybe something little, nothing necessarily really big for this anniversary. I guess I kind of expect on the wedding anniversary, where I like seriously committed to life together, that I should get a present.
That's the stereotypical one. I think that's what most people do is until you get married, it's the anniversary of when you started dating.
Yeah.
It's like, 2 years dating, 3 years dating. But then once you get married, everything else goes out the window, and it's just, okay, wedding anniversary, Valentine's, and then the usual holidays.
Yeah. Well, so Peter did get me a gift, but again, I wasn't like expecting some big expensive piece of jewelry or something.
Yeah.
But he got me a really cute pillow with a big heart on it, and a nice card, and I got him a very nice card. And then we went out to dinner at Charo Steak and Del Rey.
How was that?
It was excellent. I had the lobster that you like so much.
Yeah, it was as good as it was last time.
Yeah, it was really good. And so this is kind of a crazy thing. I've never seen it anywhere else, but it's kind of like a Mexican-style lobster. So it's a full lobster cut in half, and then they fill it with tamale kind of
sauce
material,
like
and then the sauce on top. Yeah. And one side has the red sauce, one side has the green sauce. So it was delicious, quite filling.
Yeah, I think what surprised me the most was how good the lobster was in Tucson. I think like Arizona isn't really known for our seafood, surprisingly.
Middle of the desert, yeah.
And so that's like one of the only places that as soon as I had it, I was pretty surprised.
Yeah, well, I mean, the restaurants ship it in from Maine or probably Mexico or maybe California. And I'm sure it's probably been frozen. I doubt they ship it in too. Well, there was a restaurant actually here in town that's closed now, but they insisted that they flew seafood in from Mexico every couple of days.
Insisted.
So. Wow, insisted
they did that.
Well, I guess I was skeptical. That's why I said they insisted they did.
Fair. Well, that sounds like a good weekend. You got a big week coming up with your traveling, and that's for Sober in the City, right?
Yeah. So Zero Proof Experiences, they put on events called Sober in the City, and it's about 100 women getting together in Tampa, Florida.
Wild.
So wild, 3 days. And of course, there's a lot of flamingos in Tampa, and I learned something new, a new word. Do you know what a group of flamingos is called?
Flamingi?
A flamboyance.
Flamboyance.
Isn't that very cool?
Yeah, I like that. It sounds like a good gay bar name. The Flamboyance.
Exactly. Yeah, and the flamingos would be kind of a cool little sign or
decoration. Yeah, it's just the whole theme.
Logo or yeah. So I mean, it's much nicer than a group of crows is a murder.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean that entire event sounds like a good time too.
Yeah.
And the theme of it being flamingos, I'm assuming you have a bunch of pink feathery clothing and hats and stuff that you have packed up and ready.
Well, there's a flamingo the first night, and everybody's supposed to wear pink. And then I, of course, like accessories, so I have some big flamingo earrings, and then I got some flamingo headbands, and I got a few extras for some of my closest friends.
Nice. You got to make sure they're strapped up.
Yeah, so that we can be our own little flamboyance.
Yeah.
And so then there's pickleball, and there's the big fancy dinner on Saturday night, and then a bunch of other little sessions and seminar kind of things. So it should be pretty fun.
Yeah, that sounds like a good time. I mean, a lot of these people you talk to throughout the year,
Absolutely,
and then this is like the one big time.
Not two, at least twice a year.
Twice a year, but one in the recent time it's a pretty big deal. I mean, everyone across the country, across the world, in some cases, coming out to meet each other, and they've obviously made these friendships over a long time online.
Good stuff. Yeah, I'm very excited. And how about you?
Not much. Weekend. I mean, we were here, so you kind of know what was going on there. Recorded and then hung out with some friends. Went out to dinner. The usual. I don't know. It was a nice little kind of like mini staycation almost, I guess, getting out of Phoenix a little bit. Drove back Sunday, which was a little bit of a hike. Quite a bit of drive. Didn't get back till later, but that was fine. And then just been chugging along this week. But I think we're ready to go and hop into some of these cases updates. What do you want to start
Okay.
there?
Updates. So back to Philips. We've been talking about the Philips CPAP recall quite a bit. And there was just an update on the total death count at this point, and it's up to 561 deaths since the recall back in 2021. So that's related to the use of the Philips CPAP machines.
Wow.
Yeah, and they between July and September of 2023, there were more than 7,000 reports, including 111 reports of deaths.
And so the deaths are from diseases or things that you can kind of contract from using this product, from inhaling those toxic materials.
Right.
But I would also assume that some of these are cancers, for example, and they take a long time.
Right. So cancers or deaths from the cancers.
Yeah, death from the cancers, but that death amount is probably going to rise and at a pretty good exponential rate because those diseases take a long time to really.
Yeah, exactly. That, and then also the fact that people are going to relate cancers that they may have had even before the recall, but they didn't have any idea that it could have been related to the CPAP machine. So as the awareness grows and the doctors are relating, these particular cancers back, then those numbers rise as well.
So what does it look like if let's say a family member of mine passed away and they had a cancer, and I see all these cases coming up and I realize, wow, that family member was on a CPAP machine for a few years, and the drug is one of the ones that have a high likelihood. One of the cancers are high possibility that was connected to the CPAP machine. Is there still a lawsuit there even though that family member has already passed, or what does that look like on the back end trying to make that connection?
It could be. And again, this would go state by state depending on the statute of limitations. But so, for example, in Arizona, a wrongful death claim is 2 years from the date of death. So if you figured it out within that time frame, you potentially could still have a case. It's oftentimes a bit more difficult if the person has already passed away. You're going to hope, at this point, you're just looking at medical records. I mean, you're not going to have actually samples, pathology, that sort of thing, depending on whether or not they, what is in the records and what samples might have been preserved. So it's going to be more difficult, but that's not to say that it couldn't be related. Or be related back and substantiated. So it's definitely worth checking into. And again, different states have different statute of limitations, so it could be longer, it could be shorter. But yeah, that's a possibility as well.
And for the 2 years on wrongful death claims, in a lot of these situations, it takes years for these defects to come out. And does that have any effect on kind of that statute of limitations there, where maybe it was 2 years after that person died, but no one had any idea there's issues with this product until 3-4 years after?
Yeah, again, it would be really hard to prove at that point, and it would depend on the state, and there are arguments that could be made. A lot of states have what's called the discovery rule, and so that goes from the time when you knew or should have known that you suffered an injury. So that would kind of fit into the scenario that you're setting forth, where the person's died, but nobody thought until significantly later that it could have been related. So again, it is a possibility, and you should reach out because it would depend on the state, the law, the statute of limitations, whether there's a discovery rule, and then what kind of finagling and arguing your attorney could do. Yeah.
I mean, I would imagine that's it probably applies to like some of the AIDS drug cases because I mean that's been going on for a really long time, and they had knowledge of it since the very early days that they released it to the market. But yeah, those situations I imagine are pretty complicated and definitely a case by case basis, and incredibly difficult for the families as well. Once a family member passes, you take your time to grieve, but at some point you want to move on from it, right? You want to kind of just leave that in the past, what it's in the past, and I would imagine something like this might bring up a lot of those emotions and difficulties.
Well, yeah, definitely, and I think for some people, I mean, I've talked to a lot of clients over the years around these things. things. And some people feel like they like having, an explanation or an answer or why this might have happened. But on the other side, a lot of times, we'll end up saying to the person, no, it does not look like this is related. Sometimes that's a relief because they feel like, okay, there's nothing, nobody did anything wrong. It's just the way it went. They died of, natural causes, but it wasn't some evil corporation who was prioritizing profits over their loved one's life and safety and all of that. So it really depends. Some people feel much more comfortable knowing that they didn't have a lawsuit. Others feel better, standing up and advocating on behalf of their loved one and kind of, making an effort to ensure that doesn't happen to other families in the future.
Yeah, that makes sense. Definitely a case-by-case basis. Moving back to the CPAP machines, though, those deaths are definitely racking up pretty quickly, and I imagine it's only going to increase more as studies and the word gets out about these conditions. Yeah,
it's going and it's going to continue. The numbers are going to continue to rise. And we did talk on the not the last one, not our Valentine's Day special, but the show before that. We talked about the fact that Philips is no longer going to be selling the devices in the United States. They're in the process of complying with a consent decree in the U.S. To ensure that these problems are resolved and that they would not occur again. So that's a big change as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's good. It's good that they're off the market.
They're off the market.
I mean, it's just still a shitty situation because we know that these types of diseases and conditions take a while for them to become noticeable, for them to be diagnosed, and these machines are so widely used. Mm-hmm. I mean,
and are still widely used, even though they're not selling new ones. I mean, hundreds of thousands of people, billions of people actually are using them currently. And I think it would just be really scary too, even if you were able to get rid of the Philips and get a different one today, you know how many years you used it. You don't have cancer today, but just that anxiety of, am I going to get one of these cancers?
Mm-hmm. And that entire time, sleep apnea, it varies a lot on the severity of it. For some people, it's completely necessary to have a CPAP machine. For other people, it's something that definitely helps their day-to-day, but isn't a life or death type situation. And I'd imagine in those cases, it's a lot more difficult because, their doctor probably gave them the option, said, this might help you, or it might not. It's something that it's up to you. And they make the conscious decision to do it, just see if it helps. And then they find out 2-3 years later that it could lead to these serious conditions.
Yeah. I mean, it's difficult too, though, because, lack of sleep can be a problem for you. It can be a risk factor for a lot of conditions as well, and can affect your health even if it's not life or death. So, man, it's kind of you're screwed one way or the other almost. Yeah.
Well, definitely keep us updated on that. I will be curious to see how many of these conditions kind of come up, how the numbers are acting here, especially with this recall. I mean, hopefully it slows down, but I'm not too sure.
Well, and this is a very active litigation, and people are filing lawsuits daily. And so those numbers are just going to keep going up as well.
Yeah, definitely. What other updates do you have for us?
Okay, Camp Lejeune. And this is interesting. We've talked quite a bit about this, but a study was actually just released, and it was a governmental study, and it compared people who lived at Camp Lejeune with another similar military base, and that one was in Camp Pendleton, California. So it was a similarly sized base, but the Camp Pendleton, of course, did not have the issue of contaminated water. And they showed, sure enough, the people at Camp Lejeune were 20% more likely to be diagnosed with a variety of cancers. And the key about this was a study that the government had done, and they actually didn't want to release it. But in the litigation, the plaintiffs were saying, look, this is clearly relevant and it needs to be released. So that did just get released. It's a 64-page paper. And sure enough, it did show that this was a very dangerous place to be stationed and to have your family. And the thing that is going to be it's going to be, obviously that's very helpful to the litigation as a whole, but it's also helpful because it addressed some specific conditions. And we talked about before there was like an expedited option for certain types of cancers that were more clearly linked than others, and this may expand that list of the linkable cancers. And so this study showed, so it was some types of leukemia, lymphoma, cancers of the lung, breast, larynx, esophagus, thyroid, and soft tissues.
Jesus.
So it kind of opens up that list where we have a much better connection and a really good comparison. I mean, it's a military base. All else is very similar, other than the fact that they don't have contaminated water.
Yeah. It makes sense that the government didn't want to release it. Thank goodness that they did, that the prosecution pushed it. I mean, 20%, that's a pretty large number there, and those conditions are terrifying. I mean,
again, really, really serious, awful things. I mean, they were drinking toxic water. And
it's veterans and their family.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kids and mothers and sisters that were just there.
Yeah, everybody on the base.
Supporting the family. And
employees, the whole 9 yards.
That's terrible. Terrible. Well, I'm glad that report did come out, and it's shedding some light on it, and it makes sense that it's going to be added. Those conditions are going to be added to the expedited.
I mean, that's not a for sure, but again, there's a good chance of that, because I mean, it makes sense to do the expedited if there is strong evidence, and you don't have to be, getting into the weeds of proof. So the expectation is based on this that likely will happen, but I never like to make guarantees.
And again, with like this government, I mean, this is a government study recognizing that a government premises had this contamination, that they were responsible for these serious life-altering, life-ending diseases in some cases. Is there any changes on the back end? There's no criminal prosecution. Like, how is anyone being held accountable on a more individual basis, or is this just like, hey, sorry, we fucked up, guys, here's...
Well, it's more complicated, too, when you're dealing with the government.
Yeah, of course.
And there's all sorts of protections. So, I mean, I don't know if particular people who maybe had the information and should have done something. Yeah. I don't know who those people are or kind of what that's. I'll check into it and see if I can find anything out, maybe the next update.
I would just hope that there would be some more accountability. Like, I think with these prescription companies, these medical device companies, there's a lot of money. And as much as I disagree with it, I see where they're coming from, right? They're prioritizing profits. They want billions of dollars, millions and billions of dollars, and they're willing to sacrifice people's lives. Government, I would imagine, and I think a lot of people view the government as someone that's obviously supposed to protect their citizens, protect their nation, and so they would be held to a little bit higher accountability.
I mean, so they should be, but at the same time, I mean, when you're in the military, basically your body is owned by the government at that point, and there's all kinds of, I mean, they can send you out there and have you shot by people. I mean, it's...
Yeah.
I mean, yes, they should be taking reasonable measures to protect you.
But the families, they don't own the families' bodies, right? Like, so that's completely... different. Anyways, that's just a curiosity there. I'm assuming probably not. It's easier in their hands if they can just kind of say, "Oh, my bad, guys. Here's a study. You're right. We fucked up. We'll expedite it," which thank goodness they are. But moving on. What other updates?
Well, a couple more. So Ozempic cases, of course, we've talked a lot about that. And it still is early in the litigation, but these have now been consolidated into a multi-district litigation. They've been consolidated in the Eastern District of Pennsylvania, so Philadelphia area. And there are, so what happens, and again, just kind of recap, if you're a regular listener, you know this, but cases get filed in various jurisdictions across the country, and then it's determined where they're all going to be consolidated, and then all of those cases get moved. And so there were 55 cases filed, and so those 55 now are going to be consolidated in Pennsylvania. And again, kind of how this process works is that there are, I mean, we had talked, I don't even remember the numbers about the one for Morgan & Morgan and how many thousands of cases that they had that weren't filed.
Yeah.
And again, most attorneys, you'll file maybe a couple of cases and you want to file them in jurisdictions that you would like the case to be consolidated in. But
And
you
the
don't.
best cases too, right? I mean, most of them.
Yeah, definitely the best cases. But you don't go file, and it's expensive. I mean, filing fees are probably average $400 or $500 per case. And so if you have 10,000 cases, you don't necessarily want to file all of them right away. If you've got a good statute situation, these are all new enough, right? Yeah. But then once it gets consolidated, it's a much more efficient process, and you can direct file. So as soon as the consolidation happens, that's when you see the numbers moving dramatically.
Yeah.
And people might think, 55 cases, that's not very many. It's not, but we know that there's tens of thousands of cases hanging out in attorneys' offices right now that haven't been filed.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see, how crazy the numbers get now.
Yeah, I think especially with just how big this is on social media. We talked about this, how this is like one of the first, I think, drug MDL type of just massive litigation situation that has been directly connected to social media in some type of way, that a lot of people are talking about. That I think that there's a lot of faces that you can connect to this Ozempic case, right?
So famous faces.
Exactly, with a lot of influence. And as you said, it doesn't really make sense for a lot of these attorneys to be filing these cases one by one. I mean, 400 to 500 per case and 10,000, 20,000, some of these law firms. I mean, that is just a shit ton of money. So they want to wait until it's consolidated, and that process is a lot easier, and we see a massive flood of filed cases.
Yeah, and I'm sure that's going to be happening. This one's not going away anytime soon, and it will be in the news quite a bit.
Well, I'm assuming we'll see a lot more as soon as these numbers come in. I mean, this is something that we've already seen news stations talk about, which is pretty rare, I would argue. A lot of these cases that we talk about, you don't see on
you have to listen to our podcast.
Exactly. But this one stands out because a lot of news stations do talk about it. And when they start getting those clickbait numbers, I mean, 10,000 cases, 20,000, 30,000, whatever it may be, we'll definitely be seeing that in the news.
Yeah. Well, and just the fact that, I mean, everybody wants to lose some weight, and it's being touted as an easy, a quick, easy fix. Yeah. I mean, so much so that there's shortages of the stuff. So, with the numbers of people using it, of course, the numbers of complications are going to continue to rise. Yeah. So this thing is not going away anytime soon.
Well, definitely keep us updated there. As soon as those numbers come in, I'm sure that I'm curious, and our listeners are curious as well. Any final updates on cases?
So one more consolidation. Again, we spoke about the Suboxone dental injury case, and this was the Suboxone that's it's a film that you put in your mouth, and it was causing severe tooth decay. And this one now also has been consolidated into a multi-district litigation. This one is in the Northern District of Ohio, and there were only 15 suits that had been filed to date, but it has been consolidated. And again, very similarly to what we were just saying, I mean, this is something that there are going to be really big numbers on. Yeah. And so now that it is consolidated, those numbers are going to start.
What does that process of consolidation look like? Because if they've only filed 15 cases, do they just have to go to the judge and say, hey, listen, we've got a lot more in the barrel, trust us, and then the judge trusts them? Do they have to, what does that look like?
Yeah, there's not a lot of trust involved, actually. Trust a lawyer? What? Wait, just a minute. Yeah, so what they do is they're, at the hearing, both sides, sometimes both sides want it to be consolidated, and sometimes the defense doesn't want it to be consolidated, and so they would both make their arguments. But the argument, of course, would be, here's the number of cases that we currently have, and then it would have to do also with the number of people likely affected out there. And so, how many people use this medication? What's the incidence of problems with the medication? So you want to basically go into the judge and say, yeah, there's only 15, but there's probably, 50,000 that are going to come in. And what happens sometimes is that that there will be a hearing before the judicial panel, and they will say, I don't think that we're not going to consolidate this now. Maybe later, but at this point, we don't think that there's enough cases to have it make sense. And so oftentimes you do see that, and then at the next convening of the panel, they may reapply, basically, argue it again, and sometimes it will then get approved. So I'm assuming that the arguments were significant enough and the numbers that they were providing them were high enough, again, that just with 15, because that's not a lot. But that being said, if you had 15 around the country, you don't want to have to litigate it 15 times.
Have they ever revoked that consolidation where they made this argument, they said, okay, we'll consolidate it, and then after, 5, 6 months, a year, whatever it is, just not that many cases come in? Those numbers don't really line up. Or is it a situation where attorneys really never ask for it unless they're 100% sure that it's necessary?
I don't think that it's ever been revoked. I don't know that there would be a process for that. But you do see some kind of fizzle and burnout and get resolved. And so if truly there were only 15 cases, I think it would probably get resolved. Or what would happen, one way of closing them down is that the judge could remand them back and just say, I'm not going to do this for 15 cases. You guys can all go back to your home courts, right?
Send it back
pack up and go home. But the remand also happens sometimes when there are a lot of cases, but a settlement isn't being reached. They've gone through a few bellwethers, and the judge is just saying, look, this isn't going to be a global resolution, sending them all back. So I don't think that it would be undone per se, but maybe shut down one way or the other, but not revoked per se.
That makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. And I would assume it's not a very common situation. I mean, the amount of money that these law firms have invested and will invest in it, they want it to be a sure shot thing where, it's always in the air of whether or not you're going to win a case. You only take cases that you feel like there's a good reason to, or you have a good chance. But especially with the consolidation, I mean, you got to have like a lot of cases under your belt. You're not just rolling the dice there. Yeah,
you're not. But, at the same time, the defense oftentimes really wants this to happen as well because it's much more efficient for them as well. They're litigating in one place as opposed to in 15 different places and having 15 different teams and 15 different judges making decisions. And one of the big reasons they do this is that, you can't have one judge dismissing cases saying there's no claim out there and another judge saying there is, or that this evidence should come in, another, conflicting decisions. It's very, very messy.
It looks bad on the system as well, right? I mean, it's supposed to be the idea, jury of your peers, judges are kind of this blank slate, the facts speak to everything. But then when you have these similar cases that are being treated very differently depending on where, it just doesn't look great.
Yeah. I mean, it's messy for both sides, and more risky for both sides.
Yeah.
So it's a good system for both sides oftentimes, and and like I said, it moves things along quite well. So these are two ones again that we're accepting cases on, the Ozempic and Suboxone, and they are both consolidated now, and so that really kind of picks up the speed.
Yeah.
And we'll be hearing a lot more about it.
Makes the process a lot easier on both sides as well. Well, those are good updates overall. It sounds like, and will lead to further updates. I mean, especially with the CPAP deaths and the Camp Lejeune. I mean, that's crazy stuff with the CDC report. Any recalls?
So, sort of. This is actually, again, it's Tesla, and there's always issues with Tesla, but good things as well. So there's not technically this is not actually a recall yet, but there's a probe of an issue with the power steering. And what happens is this is a required step before the agency actually demands a recall. So at this point, they're looking at, it's the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, and this investigation covered about 334,000 Teslas, and the issue is loss of the power steering, which has caused some accidents and near accidents. Mm-hmm. And of course, if you can't steer, this is a really serious thing.
Yeah.
So this is an ongoing investigation, and depending on the finding, there could be a voluntary recall or potentially a forced recall.
And so this is separate than from the autopilot issues we had discussed in previous episodes. This is power steering. So even if no autopilot, it's just someone driving in their car and they lose control of the car essentially because the steering isn't working.
Right. They can't steer the car. So for example, one of the cases that was linked to a crash is a driver who was trying to make a right-hand turn and the power steering's out. And so they're trying, and they couldn't make the turn and ended up striking a vehicle. And then another individual actually talked about what happened to him, and he said that he nearly went into a ditch. He said he felt the steering wheel on his 2023 Model Y jerk to the right, and he said, "quote It tried to kill me." It's taken him off into a ditch.
Yeah, 2023. I mean, that's a new model.
Right. And so, yeah, it's Model 3 and Model Y vehicles from 2023, and there's about 334,000 of them out there. So, if that's a vehicle that you have, that's something that you want to be cognizant of. Again, they're not recalling them yet, but if you're having any issues, you would want to contact the manufacturer.
Yeah.
They're saying that they may be able they've addressed some issues with a remote software fix, and it's possible that it's actually going to be, the hard parts that are going to need to be repaired. And that's, of course, a much bigger ordeal where you need to take the vehicle in. And
that's shocking there's not more that they can do, because even if you haven't had issues yet, and because it's not an official recall, there really isn't much anyone can do other than just be aware of it and hope it doesn't happen to them. But at the end of the day, I mean, if you're on the highway or getting on the highway, anything like that, or in any other situation, right? You're driving and you lose control of your car because of the power steering. You think in your head, well, thank God I've learned about this from prioritizing profits, but I wish there was more I could do. I wish I could take it in or prevent this from happening.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't want to be driving one for sure.
Yeah. 2023 too. I mean, we talked about other recall of I forgot which car it was the other week, but that was like an older model car. I think it was a Toyota.
Oh, the Toyotas. Yeah, the Toyotas.
And that was like an older year, but I think it's always shocking hearing the 2023s, because I think that's part of the fun in buying a new car is you're like, oh, new, shiny, extra safe, right? There's always safety upgrades, and you feel a little bit better about being in a brand new car because you just feel like it's safer overall and it's got new fun gadgets. But then you find out that actually the car's wheels don't work.
It's trying to kill you.
Yeah.
It's trying to steer you into a ditch.
Exactly. It's AI.
Take you out.
That's AI. That's shocking. One thing, I don't know why this reminded me of it. Have you seen the Apple Vision?
No, what is that?
It's a new product Apple put out there, and it kind of reminded me of this because of like the automated steering and all this and futuristic technology. But it's like a VR headset, but it's more AR, which is like augmented reality. And you put on the headset, and you can see through it like as if it's glasses almost, where there's a camera and then there's screens in front of your eyes. Like there is a barrier in between you and the real world, but the cameras are so fast that you don't really notice it, I guess. And then you can kind of just do stuff like you can throw up like a music video here, so you can turn to the right and there's just like a window floating in the sky.
Like in your vision, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And you can do it with like a keyboard. If you get a text, you can like pull it up and it just pulls up right in front of you, and you can boop, 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 start typing on it. Yeah, you should look it up. It's really interesting.
Apple Vision?
Apple Vision. It's a brand new product. Everyone's been talking about it this last week. I'm surprised you haven't seen any videos. There's people
I'm surprised too.
Like out at dinner, and they just have like this massive VR headset on, and they're like eating their food and then just doing little things in the air. But it's because they are moving like screens and shit.
Well, it just seems so strange that you'd be walking around in public with like a huge headset on. Yeah,
you look pretty funky. You look pretty funky, but there's videos of people like driving with it on because you can still see, you can walk around, you can ride a bike or whatever, probably not comfortably. I don't know if it's legal either, but theoretically you can.
So it's like, on some of the car on the windshields, they'll have certain things that shot up there, like your, the speedometer or your radio or something. So it's almost like that windshield screen.
It's kind of like the windshield screen, except it's just anywhere. Like it's just floating in the air, and you can just go boop, and you move the window to the side, or, you minimize it like that. And it tracks your hands and your eye movement and everything.
Okay, people are already complaining about people using their phones too much at dinner or with other people. And now, I mean, this is like, next level up, multiple levels up. It seems like kind of separating you from the world, connection with real humans in a way, isn't it?
Futuristic technology sounds pretty cool. I don't know.
So you like this thing? Are you going to try it?
I mean, it's expensive. I think it's $3,500 pre-tax, $4K total, something like that. So it's very expensive, and it's their first model. So there's a lot of
a lot of glitches will be happening.
I love the idea. I would like to try one, but I also just don't think it's worth the money because I just wouldn't use it that much. I think once they put out some newer models that are a little bit more cleaner and better.
Well, you always kind of want them to kind of get all of the kinks figured out and fix, for sure.
It looks sick, though. The Tesla discussion kind of reminded me of that, but getting back on track.
All right, back on track.
Cases we are handling.
Well, I was going to kind of dive in a little bit on the baby formula cases, only because it's in the news again. And just to kind of, we'll be brief with this because there's not a whole lot that's changed. But this is the infant formula given to premature babies in hospitals oftentimes, and it has cow's milk in it. And the problem is that cow's milk formula greatly increases the risks of a baby getting necrotizing enterocolitis, which is very serious.
Yeah.
I've talked about that before, and often deadly. And they can end up with sepsis. They can end up with having to have some of their intestines removed. It's a really, really significant problem. And so it's just been hitting the news a little bit lately. More people are kind of coming. It's an ongoing problem because it's still happening. It's still being provided. Yeah. And so, but of course, it is in a multi-district litigation in Illinois. As of last month, January, there were 342 cases filed. Not a huge number, but again, this is, this isn't a situation. It's a limited population, so it's going to be babies that are born prematurely and then are fed this formula. Mm-hmm. And just some of the stories are just really sad, where they have babies who are being fed breast milk, and then the hospital. Well, actually, there was one case where the hospital said, "Look, they're not gaining enough weight fast enough. These were twins, so we want to supplement with formula. So yes, you can use your breast milk, but we're also going to add that in the formula, and then just adding in the formula with the cow's milk, and the baby's got NEC." And then other stories where the mother had been breastfeeding, providing breast milk for the baby, and then a nurse just feeds the formula once or twice, and bam, the baby gets NEC. Just a very, very. And again, these are like just the most vulnerable possible babies out there, and it's something that has been well known now for a while. And I just really think it's ridiculous for hospitals to be continuing to feed these babies this very dangerous formula. Yeah,
that's pretty crazy. And those numbers, while they may not seem super high compared to some of our other cases, they are high for the reasons you mentioned, where it's a very specific demographic and population here, where it's premature babies in the hospitals. And how is it so? Clarify this for me. It's not necessarily a specific formula brand or product that's the issue. It's just any formula, and I'm assuming there's several of them that have cow's milk in it, and the hospitals are supplying it to these infants, these premature babies, and then this disease is.
Yeah, it's anything that has the cow's milk, although it's very limited which formulas are out there, and it's Abbott and Mead Johnson are the main formula makers, and they're the primary defendants.
Mead Johnson from Johnson & Johnson?
Mead Johnson, no. Sounds like one of the brothers broke off. Yeah. But the other thing about the numbers is that these are actual lawsuits that have been filed, and a lot of people, if a baby is diagnosed with NEC, they don't even know that it's a problem because of the formula. Because it's a condition that a baby can get. Even if it just had breast milk, okay? But if it has the cow's milk, it is greatly, greatly increased risk. And so they just think it's one of those things. Oh, it's premature.
Unlucky.
Well, but so premature babies are very vulnerable. And so a lot of times they do have problems like this, and a lot of times they don't make it. And so the parents are devastated, but they don't connect that it could have anything to do with the formula. Again, this isn't something that has been widely publicized. It's hit the news a little bit, but really not significantly. So I think if people were aware of this, there probably would be higher numbers of, higher numbers as far as lawsuits.
Well, obviously the doctors and nurses aren't aware of this either, because I'm assuming they wouldn't be giving this formula to the premature babies. And whenever this terrible situation does happen and the parents are confused and they ask the doctor, they ask the nurses, why did this happen? Was there anything that we could do to prevent it? They don't know that this is a risk. So obviously they're going to say, well, it's unlucky. This is a risk. This is something that does happen, and it's unfortunate, but it does. So what would be the next steps here? Because I can't tell if necessarily the producers of it would be the defendants or where the case is, and then are the hospitals responsible here for this as well? Because some of these situations, the babies are being given this formula without the mother's consent or knowledge.
Yeah. Well, I think both and all of the above, because so first of all, I think if it's a neonatologist should know this. I mean, there's plenty of studies. There's been information out since like the 1990s and so a good doctor should know this. And so there's a potential for medical malpractice. There's a potential for malpractice on the hospital for, like you said, providing a product that the parents are not okay with, have not agreed to. So I think both of them. But then also there's and going back to the hospital, it's a lot cheaper because the other option is formula that from human milk, and so it is much more expensive and difficult to get. Yeah. So they're saving money by providing the Abbott and the
prioritizing profits.
Right, exactly, prioritizing profits. But but I mean, there's been studies like back in 1990, they found NEC was 6 to 10 times more common in formula-fed babies than those fed breast milk. I mean, it's just study after study. Then 2009, let's see, the U.S. Surgeon General came out, this was in 2011, and said premature babies who are not breastfed are 138% more likely to develop NEC.
Jesus.
2012, American Academy of Pediatrics said preterm infants should only receive their own mother's milk or pasteurized human donor milk.
So how has this gone on for so long, and why is this still unknown, especially within the medical community? Because I would assume we've seen it in some of our cases as well, where hernia mesh, not many people knew about in the early days, but now it's widespread. People are more aware of it, and in some cases it's still being used. But a lot of the time, these doctors realize it and stop using it. They stop offering it to their patients. If this has been known since the 90s, if there have been several studies in the last 10, 15 years that directly prove it having a higher risk, 2x, 130%, I mean, that's insane. Yeah. How is this still going on?
Well, it shouldn't be. And the frustrating thing is that all of these things just take a really long time and a bunch of lawsuits, unfortunately, because even with the hernia mesh and even with the transvaginal mesh, oh my God, I mean, doctors are still saying, oh yeah, there are some complications, but I think it's a good product and I don't see a lot of issues with my patients and I recommend that you do it. And so, and again, with the hospitals, well, we've been doing this forever. And yes, some babies have it, but some babies who don't, some babies with breast milk get this condition as well. And so there are always skeptics and, hardliners out there. And, this is the way we've always done it. This is the way we do it.
It's so crazy because I would imagine if there's anywhere where skeptics should be, not very existent. There's always skeptics, but a very limited amount of them would be in the medical field, right?
Oh my gosh.
There's studies, like the entire field is based around studies and proving, these drugs work, these drugs don't work, these are the risks, these aren't the risks.
Yeah, but and to that point, though, a lot of time, there are always studies on either side, and the companies are providing information, and then it's kind of like, who do you want to listen to? But I mean, as a parent, if you have a baby that's already high risk, I mean, you want to do anything and everything to lessen that risk and to absolutely ensure that baby's safety. Yeah. And even if it was 1% more likely, I wouldn't want to use it, you
Yeah.
know, and these numbers are not those numbers. I mean, it's crazy. And so, you know, and that's, you know, hence the lawsuits. I mean, these patients and parents should be, you know, given all of the information to make the best possible decision.
And so this is a case that we're handling, and I'm assuming it's situations where parents have had premature babies and then they're diagnosed with this disease, and then you look back and see if the hospital had given them this specific formula.
Yeah, and it's very easy to see. I mean, you know, they're going to indicate what they were, you know, what they were provided in the medical records. But yeah, I mean, these cases are very active right now. The trials are supposed to be starting this year.
And who are the defendants here? Is it the product?
It's the manufacturer.
Manufacturer.
Yeah. So the MDL is against the manufacturer of the product. Some cases will also bring in the doctors and will then have a medical malpractice component as well. The doctors or the hospitals.
Yeah.
But for the multi-district litigation, it's about the companies and their failure to warn.
Yeah. I mean, I 100% agree with that the companies should be warning, but I also think with how long this information has been out there, the responsibility is a lot more on the doctor's hands than our other cases and cases that we've seen in the past, because this is just such established information.
Well, I agree, and especially because it's like this really specialized area too.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not just, you know, Joe Blow, Dr. Smith, you know, who's checking your tonsils or whatever, who's treating your premature baby. I mean, it's a very specific area and a very specialized area, and in those areas you should be up to date on all of the information. And you know, and this is, you know, as you said, pretty significant and well-known information out there. So yeah, I mean, I would expect that be
And I want
the doctors.
Is the statute of limitations here? I mean, I know it's always state by state, but for this case, is there any special situations? Because I mean, maybe someone had a premature baby. This information's been out for a while, right?
Yeah,
There were studies back in the 90s. If someone had a premature baby in the early 2000s and they were diagnosed with NEC, but then, you know, they made it through it and now they're a teenager or whatever, is there a case there that you can go back and...
Well, yeah. So two different kind of angles here. So if the baby passes away, then it's a wrongful death, and then the statute would go from the date of death or discovery rule, depending. But a lot of these babies do survive, but they have some pretty significant disabilities, because if you don't get enough nourishment as you're developing, you can have learning disabilities, physical disabilities, a lot of things along those lines. So if the baby survives, they have a claim. Their statute of limitation doesn't even start to run until they turn 18.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah. So, for example, if it was in Arizona, then the statute of limitation is their 20th birthday, because it would be 2 years from their 18th birthday.
Yeah.
So yes, there absolutely is a longer time frame for minors who are involved in any types of injuries.
Well, and this is a very niche case and situation and disease, so it's one of those that you can kind of make that direct connection a lot easier. Okay, well that's good. I know we've been handling that for a little bit, but I think that's a good update there, and good to see that it is pushing forward, because
I think we're going to see some trials pretty soon, and and a lot more information that'll get out in the news. And again, it's, you know, that's one of the really positives about these trials, is they do get out in the news, and then more people learn about it, and people who have then are having a baby will know to know how to protect themselves.
Yeah. Interesting cases in the news.
Yes. Okay. A couple of them. One is so it was referred to as gas station heroin, and what it is it's called the tianeptine. And it comes, so the FDA has actually come out and warned about a particular brand called Neptune's Fix, but it's basically Neptune's Fix or any tianeptine product.
Okay.
So it's kind of reminiscent of Kratom, which gets all kinds of hoopla.
It's good marketing, Neptune. If Neptune likes it, shit, I'll love it.
Really? Neptune?
I don't know. Well, he's a god, right? It was
The god of the sea,
if this gives
right?
him a fix, I can only imagine what it's going to do for me.
Apparently, it does give people a really good fix. I mean, it's people have been using it to get high for quite a while. It's banned in 9 states,
Wow.
but in the rest of the states, it is being sold. And again, it's like the Kratom, where you can basically get it at QT, gas stations.
Not QT. QT is pretty upscale, but Circle K, AM, PM, yeah. There's
QT doesn't carry the Kratom.
not that type of stuff, no.
Oh, okay. Well, I didn't know. I mean, I haven't been in the market for it, but it's very serious. And the reason the FDA has come out and issued this warning is that there have been reports really serious injuries, including death, people having seizures and loss of consciousness and dying. And these particular products, the company is Neptune Resources. And actually, the company has agreed to voluntarily recall its products.
Wow.
Yeah, there's been enough complaints. The specific products are Neptune's Fix Elixir, Neptune's Fix Extra Strength Elixir, and Neptune's Fix tablets. And so they have they are not distributing anymore, and they've put out a warning, or the FDA has sent a letter to convenience store, gas stations, and other organizations urging them to stop selling this, to pull it from the shelves if they have any of it.
This does sound similar to Kratom, like you said, but a little bit better in the fact that it is a very specific producer of this product.
Well, so this Neptune Resources is one, but there are other products that have tianeptine.
Okay.
So again, they haven't necessarily been recalled,
Yeah.
but any product that has a tianeptine, you want to be cognizant, because again, it's just like the Kratom in the sense that it's not regulated. It's being sold as a dietary supplement, so there isn't really any guarantee about the dosage that you're going to get, the strength of the stuff, and not the good warnings about how it's going to interact with other medications you may be taking. So really any of them you want to be careful about. And I think it was, let's see, they were saying at least 5 fatal overdoses.
Well, and what are the effects like here? Because gas station heroin, that has quite the ring to it. That's a good buzz line there. But is it supposed to have the similar effect of heroin? Is it, because Kratom kind of had this all over, right? It was like relaxing, but it would give you energy, and it would soothe your muscles, but then lubricate.
Really does everything.
Yeah, it was like all over the place.
Yeah.
Is this kind of still in that same alley, or?
Yeah, it's very similar. So it's considered a non-prescription antidepressant, and it's so how it works. Let's see. They're saying that it. Let's see. So it affects the dopamine levels in addition to your serotonin, and this can contribute to addictive behavior. It can also bring feelings of pleasure and euphoria. Increases opioid activity in the brain. So a similar mechanism of action is seen in heroin.
That's interesting. Well, it makes sense that they got that tagline then, gas station heroin. This one I haven't seen on the shelves quite yet. I mean, maybe I'll have to take a look again next time I go to Circle K or something like that. And then the specific chemical that you mentioned in it, that's in a variety of other products, but this Neptune Fix and Neptune brand is, I'm assuming, has a higher amount, and which is why there's a higher risk.
Well, I think it was more widely marketed, and so as the reports were coming in, they were specifying this particular product. But there are probably other manufacturers that are including the tianeptine in their products as well.
Jeez. Well, hopefully they get that off the shelves. I mean, I think we kind of touched on this in one of our other shows, how this unregulated, non-FDA approved supplements gray area is insane. And there's a lot of things that can kind of slip between the cracks, and people can kind of sneak in there that really shouldn't be on products or shelves. I mean, I know there's a lot of people for Kratom and against Kratom, and that's like a highly divisive topic. But I think if anyone can agree that this kind of gray area of supplements is not good.
Well, I mean, because it's not regulated.
Yeah.
And I was just looking here. So the claims, the positive claims in favor of tianeptine, the manufacturers are saying it can improve brain function, treat opioid addiction, and help with anxiety. So very, very similar to the claims about the Kratom. And some of the other brands or the other supplements that contain tianeptine are under the brand names of Tiana Green, Tiana Red, Tiana White, and Zaza.
Zaza.
I think I would go with Zaza.
Yeah, I mean, hey, that's how you know you're selling a good product. That's how you know it's
Zaza
good stuff.
Zoom. Yeah. So another thing to look out for. I mean, again, all of these supplements that you're finding at gas stations telling you that they're going to fix whatever ails you and basically get you high. It's going to be risky.
Well, just don't be buying medication at the gas station. I think
that's pretty simple and straightforward, right?
That's a good staple rule to have.
Yeah.
Any other interesting cases?
Yeah. Let's hit on one more. And this one, it's kind of an update too. We had talked about in a prior episode about a lawsuit against Google Maps.
Yeah.
And it was a guy who had been directed over a bridge that was no longer there, and he went into this river and drowned. Mm-hmm. And this is actually a really scary one. A lawsuit's been filed against Google Maps, and this is by tourists in South Africa who were trying to get to the airport, and Google Maps led them through an area that's known as Hell Run. So again, a similar situation. And I know you look skeptical, but this one actually I think is pretty darn strong.
Well, I'm just curious what Hell Run is.
Well, Hell Run is a place you don't want to go in South Africa.
Why is that?
Because you will be attacked. It's basically, they have gangs of robbers who are known to be in this area. And so when tourists are driving through there, if they're at a stop sign or something, they come up with bricks and they break through the windows of the cars. They drag people out. They steal everything. And so, but the thing is that this has happened like time after time, and it's this particular area. Yeah. And then people who are trying to get to the airport,
they have all their belongings on them.
Right. And people who are trying to get to the airport, Google Maps directs them through there. And I thought, well, are they responsible? Do they have to know, what are the dangerous areas in every single town that you're in? But the evidence here is actually really, really strong that they knew about this. And let me see, I was going to give you this specific. I'm going to go back to the specifics of this case. So they talk about 3 separate and similar incidents last year where this happened, and Google Maps knew about it. And then Google Maps did actually change their routing after this most recent lawsuit. But they're saying basically, again, they wouldn't have to know of every danger that's out there. But if they do know that this is a particularly dangerous area, and it is leading people through there, and they've been notified about it, and they don't change that, or at least provide warnings, that then they can be on the hook. And again, this is a lawsuit that's been filed, so it hasn't been resolved yet. We don't know for sure what the outcome is going to be. But the more I read, I was like, well, holy shit, this is scary. And and again, as a tourist in another country, you have no idea what's a dangerous area and what's not a dangerous area.
Yeah, I mean, when we went to Amsterdam and I was using Google Maps, like, you just don't know where you're going. You don't know anything about the area. You just trust what you always trust, which is Google Maps. And especially if you're going to the airport, right? Like, you're just trying to get home. That's your only focus. You're at the long end of a long trip. I think there's a lot of responsibility on Google Maps, not only because it's been reported, especially because of that, but after it's being reported, and they can look at this data, like all of this data is being used, I'm sure, of like the most common routes for people going to the airport from certain sides of town, whatever it may be. They can see that there are people that are trying to go back home. Like this street is a commonly used street when going to the airport.
Exactly.
And I would think that there's some adds a little bit more responsibility in my mind. I don't know. Yeah.
Well, and so the suit says that the United States, South African, and Cape Town officials had all been in communication with Google for months.
Oh my God.
Asking that Google Maps not direct users along dangerous routes through Nyanga to or from Cape Town International airport. So they're saying Google had actual knowledge that violent gangs had a propensity to assault travelers while driving near the Cape Town airport. Yeah, so I mean, literally the governments have been in touch with Google Maps. It wasn't even just that maybe they heard here or there that these things had happened.
Yeah, some soccer mom reaching out. That I can see them overlooking, but no, it's actual governments. And that's good that the government's reaching out. It makes sense because, I mean, tourism is a massive part of a lot of these economies. And if they get this reputation that on your way home, you're going to have all your shit stolen.
Well, and more than stolen. So this case that's the subject of this lawsuit. So, and again, it's like 8:44 in the morning. It's not like it's late at night or some scary time when you know not to go certain places. And so the family had stopped at a red light, and a gang of armed assailants come upon the car. One of them throws a paving brick through the driver's side window. So the brick cuts through the guy's skin and muscle to the bone, knocks him unconscious, shatters his lower jawbone into several pieces.
Holy shit!
Yeah. And then they fire the gun in the air, steal everything, and take off. And there were two other incidents. Three separate incidents that year. One of them involving a Dutch woman who died after they threw a rock through the window and it hit her in the head and literally killed her. And then a student who was driving to the airport through Hell Run and was attacked. Who was attacked and injured, and then a British surgeon who was killed.
Jesus.
I mean, so two deaths and another serious injury, again, in this exact same area, and Google Maps knew about it. And it's not like they couldn't change it. They have now. After this lawsuit was filed, now they have made the changes.
Yeah, that is horrendous.
Isn't it really crazy?
Insane. And it brings up like a bigger question that you touched on is do they have a responsibility for knowing dangerous areas in different countries? I mean, that's a pretty large responsibility there, pretty difficult. But if you are getting reports on it, maybe that's just the answer to the problem is as soon as you start getting any type of reports, it doesn't need to be a government official reaching out.
Right, but that's going to be extreme.
Yeah.
Well, and I think it goes to, the standard is if you knew or should have known. And I think so each case it's going to be different. How much evidence was there that they should have known this was dangerous? And I think the more extreme ones, I mean, if there's just certain areas of if any city or that are really, really dangerous and say everybody knows that, well, Google, damn sure needs to know that as well. And just one other quick kind of topic, because a lot of, people always ask, oh, but this happened in a foreign country, how can I sue? And for injuries that happen, if you were suing, some resort you stayed at, for example, that is very difficult. It's different. But this lawsuit is actually in the state of California because that's where Google Maps is. So So the defendant here is not in the foreign country. Yeah. The defendant is in the U.S.
What if it's like a hotel like Hilton, but Hilton offices are based in America?
So then you could again sue Hilton where they are incorporated. So here in the U.S. Yeah, but I mean, it's more difficult if you want to go sue some little mom and pop place in Costa Rica or something. Yeah. I mean, not to say you can't do it, but it's going to be a little more complicated. But Google Maps is based here in the U.S. The couple was from the U.S., and so they filed the lawsuit here, even though the injury occurred, in another country.
Yeah, well, that's a good point to bring up because I think that's like a lot of gray, murky areas we've seen, even with a lot of the like product cases and medication where the producers are based in another country. I think that like the bunk beds was a situation.
Yeah. A lot of things in Taiwan and China are manufactured there, and oh gosh, it's a nightmare.
But as long as the company's based in the States, then there's validity for a claim there. Okay, very interesting. Very interesting. I'm glad that you touched on that, and that's a good point to bring up. I think we're going to close out there. Yeah. Thank you everyone for tuning in and hanging out with us on another episode. If you have any questions or concerns, feel free to throw them down in the comment section. Whether you're watching this on Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, whatever you want, you can throw it down there. And if it's something you don't want to throw it on the public, completely understand. You can email us at podcast@showeredlaw.com. Questions, concerns, stories, whatever it may be, we'll get to it, and we're more than happy to talk about it and answer some of those questions. Thank you again for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.
Prioritizing profits.
Dangerous drug and product cases.